likes to talk. He'll try to distract you, but don't listen. Block it out and power on through.
Wait, I like to talk too.
What are you doing?
Fighting dirty.
The real Batman would never...
Told you didn't know me.
Funny guy.
Can't say the same for you.
You impudent brat. Who do you think you're talking to?
Not a comedian, I'll tell you that.
Shut your mouth!
The real Batman never talked to you much, did he? That's probably why you were so fixated on him.
Don't play psychoanalyst with me, boy.
Oh, I don't need a degree to figure you out. The real reason you kept coming back was you never got a laugh out of the old man.
I'm not hearing this.
Get a clue, Clowny. He's got no sense of humor. He wouldn't know a good joke if it bit him in the cape. Not that you ever had a good joke.
Shut up. Shut up!
I mean, joy buzzers, squirting flowers, lame. Where's the A material? Make a face, drop your pants, something.
Show yourself.
You make me laugh. But only because I think you're kind of pathetic.
Stop that!
So you fell in a tank of acid, got your skin bleached, then decided to become a supervillain. What? You couldn't get work as a rodeo clown?
Don't you dare laugh at me!
Why? I thought the Joker always wanted to make Batman laugh.
You're not Batman!
Welcome to Superhero Cinephiles Podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and bringing on another returning guest, although it's been a little bit of a game trying to get you back on the show, and that's Thompson. Damon, how you doing today?
I am amazing. How are you?
I'm doing good. So let's see if I'm remembering this correctly. I think we originally tried to do this before Christmas, and then I think we had it scheduled in January, and now it's March, and we've finally been able to get you back on the show.
It has been quite the adventure in just real life. And, you know, you've got a lot of stuff going on. I got a lot of stuff going on in this end. It was just, I just felt like, I'm really sorry. I need to push this back, but there's some stuff I got to take care of, you know, but it's everything's on the upswing, and we finally got time to carve out. Considering we're half a world away from each other, that's a pretty mean. It's no mean feat.
I mean, it's actually kind of amazing that I'm able to do as many episodes with as many different people as I do, considering all the time differences and my own schedule, which it also gets crazy from time to time. So yeah, it's amazing I'm able to get anybody on this show at all.
Well, I that probably says a lot about you more than anything, because with you being in Japan and having all the things going on with your family, just like the rest of us, and then having to work around all these time zones and stuff, and the fact that so many people want to be on this show and that you've had all these things, that's a testament to you as well as the TV show. So,
well, thank you.
Take your flowers.
Thank you. Yeah. But today we are talking about Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. So this was because back when they had I think this actually came out after the TV show ended, if I'm not mistaken. But I can't remember exactly.
I want to say it was the same. I think the season was finishing up. I think the season, I think the third season was finishing up when this was released. I believe that's what it was.
Okay, yeah. And one of the questions a lot of people had about Batman Beyond when it came out was, you know, whether or not they'd have any of the old villains on. And with a few exceptions, they generally didn't. But they did an episode with Mr. Freeze. They did an episode with Ra's al Ghul, and then for like the big finale, they did this direct-to-video movie with the Joker coming back, with, of course, Mark Hamill coming back to reprise him as well. So before we get into the movie itself, let's talk a little bit about Batman Beyond and the history, because I remember when this show came out and it was announced as the follow-up to Batman the Animated Series. And I don't know about you, but my first reaction to the news was, oh, that sounds stupid. And then I actually watched the show and I'm like, oh wait, this is actually really freaking good.
I how do I put this? I had a lot going on during this time, so I kind of catch things either after the fact or right, like I'm just behind the curve when it comes to some of the stuff, just the way life goes. And so I didn't hear much of the buildup. And then I heard it was like Batman Beyond, it takes place, X amount of years in the future. Oh, Batman. I was like, well, they did great with Batman the animated series, and that was a hard sell for me. And then as soon as the credits started, the opening credits started, I was like, I'm in. Bring it, give it to me. Let's see what we got. And I really liked the show. I thought the show was great.
Yeah, it was great. And I've been rewatching episodes here and there now that it's all on HBO Max. And yeah, it was a really good show. And it, mixing in with like cyberpunk and noir and all that kind of stuff, mixing it in with Batman. It's just, it goes. This is one of the things Derek always said, was that Batman's the kind of character that you could really take and put in any type of different situation. And recently we had done Soul of the Dragon, which was a 1970s inspired Batman kung flu film, and then you have this where it's Batman in a cyberpunk setting, and it really kind of shows that he can fit into any type of story you want to tell.
Then you got Gotham by Gaslight as well.
That was another one that was on my mind.
A detective story is a detective story is a detective story, and that definitely helps with Batman, and it's the essence of Batman, and not him beating up criminals.
Yeah, and this one really leans into the detective aspect too, in ways that I hadn't really remembered. But back when it first came out, like it was, there was a sanitized version that came out back when this was released in 2000, because this was direct to video, and I had bought the VHS when it came out, and the original. I'm not sure. Did you ever see the original cut, or did you only see the uncut version?
I've seen both.
Okay, yeah. So the original cut, for anyone who, because if you watch it on HBO Max or something now, it's only the uncut version. But I don't think the original cut exists anywhere anymore. But the original cut, they had completely changed one of the major story points, because one of the major points is, in this movie, in the flashback scenes, the reason why Tim Drake stopped being Robin and why Batman kind of pushed everyone out, like all the Bat family, why he kind of pushed them away, was because the Joker and Harley Quinn had kidnapped Tim Drake Robin, and they had brainwashed him and basically turned him into a little Joker. They, the whole idea was, we want to start a family, was what they were saying.
Yeah, baby Jay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was from and that's the storyline where they killed Jason Todd. Well, the fans killed Jason Todd. What was that? Death in the Family.
Death in the Family. Yeah, Death of the Family was the Scott Snyder one that came later. That's right.
Oh, Death in the Family.
Death in the Family. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
So it was kind of like their take on the Jason Todd story, because Tim Drake in the animated series, he was always pretty much Tim Drake in name only. He was very much more Jason Todd, I always thought, which is one of the things, because Tim Drake was always my favorite Robin. So that was one of the things that kind of disappointed me when they brought him into the animated series.
Is there a reason why they skip past Jason Todd?
I don't know. I think they just, I don't remember them ever, I've never read a reason why, but they said that they didn't, one of the things that they didn't want to, I think it was because Tim Drake was definitely the more popular Robin. And if they had brought in Jason Todd, there would have been an expectation that they were going to kill him off right away. So I think they wanted to avoid any of that speculation. So they kind of merged Jason's personality and put it onto Tim's character. And so he became, so he had very much the same origin story that Jason Todd had. Like his mom was out of the picture. His dad had these associations with Two-Face. And after his dad died, Bruce takes him in. And so it was very, very much a similar thing. And he had the kind of like, street smart attitude and all that Jason Todd had. So I always was disappointed in that, because like I said, Tim Drake was a very different kind of Robin from Jason Todd. And that had kind of disappointed me a lot, because I don't think Titans has done an okay job with him so far, but I don't think we've really gotten the kind of Tim Drake that I loved in the comics and in live action yet.
Wait a minute, there was something I was going to ask you about Tim Drake. What was it? Was Tim Drake the Robin at the time that this movie came out?
Yeah, because this came out in 2000, and I think that probably had something to do with it as well. Tim Drake was Robin up until the Damian came into the picture, I think. I mean, they had Spoiler took over for Robin for a brief period in the early 2000s, but Damian came in, and that would have been like, mid to late aughts, something like that, I believe, was when that happened.
Wow, it's been that long.
Something like that, yeah. But yeah, and in the original cut, they have the Joker's death happens by accident. Like in the uncut version, Tim Drake actually shoots him and kills him himself, and that the censors thought that was too extreme, so they had changed it around, and he had like died by spilled some water over it and gotten electrocuted or something like that, and it was kind of like a clumsy kind of death scene, and it really kind of lacked the punch that the original had. They had also done some other changes, like they had edited out some of the blood and some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they also edited out how they killed what's his name, Bonk. At the beginning, I think he dies off screen or something. I'm not 100% sure, because I know they didn't show him getting shot in the chest either.
Yeah. The Joker shoots him right, and they had changed it to something else. They'd use a different animation, or they had edited that scene out or something like that. Yeah. I remember reading about that too. There was quite a bit. There was even I don't have it in front of me. There, I could probably look it up, but there's changes in dialogue even. Because it was too harsh. There's in just something small, well, I guess relatively, in my opinion, something small, like the fight scene when the spoiler alert, for a movie that's 20 years old,
right, that the Joker's rush the club that Terry's at, and they're trying to jump Terry, and there's when they get the guns, and one of them screams slag him, which in that universe is kill him in slang. That's actually not in the unedited version, which I thought was
okay.
Like stuff like little stuff like that. Like there's another thing about how Harley Quinn they say in this that the unedited version that Harley Quinn died, and they mentioned in the other one like she fell, or
no, they said that she had never even in the uncut version, they said, because she still appears at the end, right? She's,
well, I'm just talking about like before we know that it was like something that Barbara, I think it was a conversation between Barbara and Terry.
Barbara says in the uncut I don't remember what she said in the original one, but in the uncut version, she says we never found Harley Quinn's body.
Right. Yeah, they changed that around too. It was just like those types of things, which I think is weird, because kids are smarter than these people that censors want to give them credit for.
Well, what had happened was because this was originally set to come out Halloween 2000, but you had the Columbine in 1999, and that had really kind of had this backlash against violence in children's media. Every time there was a school shoot, and this happens still to an extent, but back then it was like every time there was some sort of school shooting or some sort of anything involving kids and violence, you had this massive, pearl clutching of people saying that, there's too much violence in kids media. It's Doom was the big targeted video game back then, Marilyn Manson, all that kind of stuff became like Power Rangers at one time became a target. And Power Rangers there's a huge backlash against Power Rangers when it first came out.
Wow, really? That's ridiculous.
Well, in fact, so much so that do you remember the Spider? And I've told this story before, but do you remember the Spider-Man animated series in the mid-90s? Yes, it was on Fox. The censors had so many ridiculous restrictions on that show, and even one note, and the producer has taken he kept the notes, and whenever he goes to cons and stuff, he reads them out to people. And like
Wow.
one of the notes was that if Spider-Man lands on a rooftop, they have to make sure that there are no pigeons that he could possibly hurt when he lands on the roof or something like that. It was ridiculous.
What?
And it's like they couldn't show like direct punches and all this kind of weird stuff. They had all these restrictions on the show, and that was all because of the backlash for Power Rangers.
That was because of Power Rangers.
was
I
because of
remember
Power Rangers,
hearing
yeah.
that story. I
Yeah.
didn't know that was because of Power Rangers. That
Mhm.
is hilarious and ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny when you look at it now, but yeah, Power Rangers was a really controversial show when it came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wow.
But back to this movie. So that's kind of the background for this, and it was the fans who had actually gotten Warner Brothers to finally release the unedited version, because it was 2 years after the release they finally released this uncut version, which is now the basic one. And this is the first animated Batman film that got a PG-13 rating, actually, too.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's kind of the background for this. And for anyone who hasn't watched it, right? Batman Beyond obviously takes place in the future. Bruce Wayne is like in his 70s or 80s at this point now in the show. Kevin Conroy is still voicing him, but he's basically Clint Eastwood, essentially what he is. You watch Unforgiven or you watch Gran Torino, that's basically Bruce Wayne in this universe. And he's kind of retired. He's living basically in seclusion in Wayne Enterprises in Wayne Manor, but then he gets this young kid named Terry McGinnis, voiced by Will Friedle of Boy Meets World fame. Ironically enough.
That's who that is.
Yeah, it's so weird. I'd done a rewatch of Boy Meets World, I think a few years ago, and going from that to Batman Beyond, it's so weird seeing those two different roles. But yeah, he ends up getting involved with Bruce and becomes the new Batman. And he uses this before Bruce had retired when he was in his 50s. He had tried this experimental high-tech suit that has all these kind of capabilities. Like it has flight, it has like collapsible batarangs, all sorts of different technology in it. Basically like a slightly low-tech Iron Man suit.
Mm-hmm.
And Terry picks up the suit, starts using it, and Bruce is basically his man in the chair, to use the term from the new Spider-Man movies in the MCU. And he's basically monitoring him from the Batcave. And they've also got Ace the Bat Hound in it too, which I thought was a nice little touch.
Yeah. That was. I mean, there was. I don't know. I really don't have anything to add. I really dug this show when it came out. I really liked the villains. Ink especially, I thought she was really cool, and she, and the villains were a little more complicated. They weren't just mustache twirling, it really carried on. It really improved, in my opinion, improved upon what they did with Batman, the animated series.
Yeah, and I can see why they went with something like this, because I felt like the last season of Batman the Animated Series was definitely one of probably the weakest of that series, and they had felt, I think they were trying to lean. I think a big part of it was, stuff that the network wanted them to do or something like that, because they lead much more heavily into the supervillains, as opposed to the early episodes when they'd have a mix between the supervillains and the gangland elements and all that kind of stuff. I think the show definitely suffered when it moved over to, I think it was Kids WB at the time. But this show gave them like a real shot in the arm and like really caused them to kind of stretch their creative muscles. And it was great. It was kind of like this, it was like this mix of Batman with some Spider-Man elements, but in this high-tech world. And it was really cool. And obviously everybody wonders, anytime there's any sort of Batman media, right? The big question is, when's the Joker going to turn up? Mm-hmm. And they had kind of sidestepped that for a while, because instead of having the Joker, there's this gang in the universe called the Jokers, who are basically style themselves after the Joker, and they're just kind of like these recurring antagonists. But then this movie comes out, and it's the big return of the Joker, and he's he knows that he knows that Bruce used to be Batman. And one of the things is, and we find out in this movie, The Final Fate of the Joker, that Tim Drake killed him after Joker and Harley tried to brainwash him, and it basically caused Bruce to force everyone else around. And now all of a sudden he pops back up again, and Bruce kind of forbids Terry from being Batman to avoid him like having to deal with any of this.
Yeah, then they have their fight. He leaves. Terry leaves in a huff. Then the Joker shows up to the Batcave.
Yeah,
with the what do you call it? The Joker gas, Joker toxin gas or whatever. I really thought it was cool. I didn't notice it until I think I watched it this morning when Terry gets back, when he's freaked out about, he finds Bruce on the floor and all that. But when he gets in the room, gets in the Batcave, it's painted in spray painted and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Which was reminiscent of the first episode when he runs after having a fight with his biological father. I guess we could get into that later, I guess. But getting his biological father and comes in and he is dead. His dad's dead. So it's kind of like it was a nice callback to what happened in the first movie or in the first episode.
Wow, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, you're right. And
I was like, and I think it made it more. I've seen this movie quite a few times, but this time it made it more urgent when I noticed, like, oh, that's dope. What I mean? And then of course, he rescues him, all that stuff. But I thought that was one of the really cool things that I liked, that kind of nodded back to earlier episodes.
Yeah, I never even realized that. That's a really good point. And that's awesome that they had that callback in there. And just like, some of the imagery that you see in this movie is just so unsettling. Like when you were like, the whole idea of, okay, he's going to brainwash Tim Drake and turn him into a little Joker. It sounds, comic booky and kind of ridiculous on its face. But when you see it in the movie and, Tim hops off that platform and just like the way they animated his face, and it's like, this tortured laughing expression, it's really unsettling. It's really creepy, actually.
They did there's a couple shots like that. There's one where I think it's at the end when Joker is trying to choke out Terry, and he kind of laughs, and then I forget what he something threatening, and as he chokes him, but then he starts laughing again. It was just the way they showed it from Terry's perspective. It was Mark Hamill should always play Joker. When I hear somebody else do it, I'm like, yeah. I like it because I respect the skills, but you're not Mark Hamill.
I don't know. I'm up for different interpretations of him, because I remember they had done when they did the Birds of Prey TV show, and they had Mark Hamill dub over the Joker in that, and it was didn't quite work for me when they did it that way.
I never saw that.
Don't. It was terrible. It was in after Smallville was such a big hit, WB decided to do a Batman TV show without Batman, because they had managed to do a Superman TV show without Superman. So they had done Birds of Prey with and God, it was so bad. It was like it was just terrible. And another, also with that unsettling imagery, like you were mentioning, when Terry finds Bruce infected with the Joker toxin, like that was another really unsettling moment too. And just hearing Conroy's laugh with that was, really, really well done, I thought. Yeah.
This is a really good movie. I watched it. I was like, man, this is really good. I can't believe I'm still like this.
Yeah, but going back to what we mentioned before, like the detective story is surprisingly well done, because sometimes in these when someone tries to do a Batman detective story, sometimes they fall on the detective aspect. Like I remember reading Hush when that came out, right? And it's actually like the dumbest detective story ever, because it's like the most obvious answer is the guy who, suddenly pops, the long lost character that suddenly pops up in Batman's life. and turns out being the mystery villain. I'm like, come on. Or when they did Arkham Knight, the video game, when it's, they show all these references to Jason Todd, and you're like, well, obviously, I'm like, they're not going to make Arkham Knight Jason Todd. That's too obvious. And then that's exactly what they did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sucks. Yeah. Ugh. Yeah,
So-
I remember hearing about Hush and like, yeah, it's so good. Did it like just reviews or whatever? I'm like, oh, and I read it. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. I mean, you get sucked into it at the time because it started off really good, but then when you're thinking about it, you're like, wait a minute, this actually doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It was the same thing with Long Halloween had kind of that too. Actually, when you go back and reread that story, like the detective story is actually not that good at it. The mystery is not that well done.
Actually, I have a question. I was going to bring this up later, but since we're talking about it now, you are an author, and I thought I would ask you this.
Okay.
Okay, so the reveal at the I keep skipping all this other stuff. The reveal at the end when we find out that it's the chip that's planted in on the back of Jason Todd, and we find out the transformation,
Tim Drake,
all that stuff.
but yeah,
Tim
basically,
Drake,
yeah.
Jason Todd's spirit, Tim Drake name.
Yeah.
But when we find out like what the deal is, every time I watch it, I'm like, did I miss something? Did they talk about like how Joker experimented on him? My question to you is this: do you feel like it was a fair mystery?
I think so. I think the idea that I think that was kind of like I think they had kind of chickened out a little bit though at the end. So because I think I think the original idea is that they wanted it to be, the whole idea of Tim Drake becoming the Joker. I think it would have worked better if it was not like the Joker's consciousness inside Tim Drake. If it was actually like Tim Drake, because of all this post-traumatic stress, had just cracked and he thought he was the Joker and he kind of became the Joker. I think that kind of worked a little bit better, but I think they kind of got scared about doing that for possibly for one of two reasons. One is maybe they were worried that the fans would have been angry because it's called Return of the Joker and you don't really have the Joker coming back. And two, I think they were worried about tarnishing Tim Drake's legacy within the canon type of thing. And so they wanted to have that kind of, so I think that's why they did that. And they had this whole idea of it's this microchip that contains the Joker's consciousness. That's kind of what I think is why they did it. But I do think that it does feel kind of like a cop-out when they get to that explanation.
They do tie it up. Because I did look some of this up. Like I think it's the DCAU fandom wiki, and they reference later. I want to say it's either I think it's a Justice League Unlimited episode that he had stolen some of it from Project Cadmus.
Okay.
The problem is that episode came out in 2005.
Yeah.
Like 5 years after. So, I mean, they buttoned it up. I was just curious, as an author, did you feel like it was a fair mystery? Because like the only part of the round that I couldn't wrap my head around was where did he get the genetics? Where did he get that from? Or where did he get this expertise? Because it wasn't talked about in the movie. Yeah.
That part, the whole Joker consciousness thing does feel kind of like a cop-out. But the whole idea of Tim Drake being the Joker, I think that was a pretty well done mystery. Right.
I agree. It was just that last little bit.
Yeah, that definitely feels like they're trying to that felt like they didn't want to fully commit to the idea of Tim Drake becoming the Joker, so they wrote themselves this out. Which, funny enough, ended up becoming kind of a plot point in the Arkham games too.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not. You've never played the Arkham games?
I'm not a video game guy, really.
Okay. Well, do your kids have a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation? Okay.
Nope.
If you ever get the chance, the Arkham games they're really cool. But so in the Arkham City was the second game, and the Joker's dying, and he tries to and he tries to kind of like, survive by, infecting Batman with this virus. And then in the last game of the series, Arkham Knight, the Joker's consciousness is still existing in Batman. And so like, even though he's dead, his consciousness is still alive within Batman. And it's kind of like this idea of like the Joker slowly taking Batman over.
That's pretty cool.
It was, it had some issues in parts, but overall it was a pretty cool game. And part of it too was, I think after Joker died in Arkham at the end of Arkham City, there was kind of like this expectation that they'd be moving away from the Joker. And then they kind of still found a way to bring him back in Arkham Knight. And it got a little bit, because every single one of these games, there were 4 games in total. And every single one of them involved the Joker as like kind of the primary antagonist.
Man.
Yeah, so it got a little bit old when it got to that point, but the basic idea behind it, and it got pretty unsettling at points. Like even though you're not a game, if you ever get the chance, they're definitely worth playing, or at least worth watching, like a playthrough on YouTube or something like that.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so what else should we talk about here? I really liked how Terry kind of rose up to the detective spot in this, because he basically, normally in the show, like it's Bruce, even though he's the man in the chair, he's still doing most of the intellectual work. He's doing most of the heavy lifting. Terry's basically just like his instrument out in the world. Mm-hmm. This movie, I like that Terry actually steps up himself and has to take it upon himself to solve the mystery.
He becomes Batman.
Yeah.
In this, he really becomes Batman at the end of this, which I think is the last chronologically, as far as the story is told, is the end of the DCAU, like the Timverse. I think the epilogue episode of Justice League. Yeah, you're right.
I think that's
you're right. You're right.
Which is, but that's actually, but you're right. As far as big events go, this is probably the last one. I'm not sure where it falls in continuity with the time travel episode of Justice League Unlimited, though.
Yikes! I have
no idea. But because I know that came out, it depends on what happens, because in that, Batman's part of the future Justice League, so I'm not and they don't mention any of that in this at all, so I'm not really sure where that falls in line with it.
Oh, that's
but
the point.
Basically, like, it's one of the endpoints of the Timverse, yeah.
But yeah, I like how at the end, Bruce co-signs before he meets Tim. Before he goes and sees Tim, Bruce co-signs. He really puts him over and says, you don't. The suit didn't make you. You made the suit. Basically, telling him like you're Batman, bro.
Yeah. You're
doing. I do have a small complaint. I want to make sure I get her name right. Where was Maxine Gibson?
Oh yeah, you're right. I didn't even really think about that. Yeah, she doesn't pop up at all in this. So for anyone who's listening to this and wondering who he's talking about, Max was this supporting character who finds out about Terry and Batman, ends up being kind of like becoming like an ally of theirs.
I would assume that she would graduate into the woman in the chair. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's because I completely forgot about that character. But you're right. They've been kind of setting her up for that aspect of it.
That'd have been cool. I think one of the first things, like, if you call me, like, you will not call me Robin. But I love that character, and she's nowhere to be found, and they're like the best of buds. So
but yeah, she's basically kind of like the Alfred in this, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she doesn't pop up in this at all. She's not even mentioned, and she did pop up in I think she popped up somewhere else. No, never mind. I was looking at something else. Yeah, she's not been seen or mentioned in any of the follow-ups. So that's interesting. We never really find out what happens to her. I guess she was just out of town that day or something.
Hopefully she wasn't in one of those buildings that they just
what do you think of the whole, because one of the things that also kind of disappointed me, though, is that we never really hear much about what happened to Nightwing. because there's just that
was in my
reference,
notes too. I really, yeah.
because we just get the reference that he left, and he left Gotham to establish himself in another city, which we assume is Bloodhaven, like in the comics, but we never see or hear from him at all in the whole runtime of Batman Beyond. Not this movie, not the 3 seasons of the TV show either.
And that stinks. However, he is depending on how you feel about the comics, there is a Nightwing centric storyline in the Batman Beyond comics.
Okay. I'll have to I've never checked those out, so I'll have to take a look at that.
So that good. Then I won't spoil it for you. But
okay.
Yeah, he's they do something with him in that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, I've always liked Nightwing more than Batman, to be honest. And so, it would have been nice to see or hear what happened.
Yeah, Nightwing's probably, like, aside from Superman, Nightwing's probably my favorite DC character. So I'm definitely up there with that.
And can you imagine what kind, with the Grayson spin, like the stories he'd probably tell about Bruce?
Yeah. What do you think of how they handled Tim Drake in this movie?
It made a lot of sense. And I mean, he's what, 12, 13 when
something
all that
like
goes
that.
down?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was 12 or 13 and life was already, I was 7th grade probably. So yeah, life was already difficult being 12 or 13. Now add a cape to it and being tortured. Like,
yeah,
the PTSD had to be just awful. I think they mentioned that there was a year of rehab he did with Dr. Tompkins before they let him go and let him go about his business or whatever. I like the way they handled it. Wasn't too ham-fisted or anything.
It does make me wonder too, like, just timing wise, what had happened to him, because in Mystery of the Batwoman, he's actually drawn as older in that movie than he is in this.
Yeah.
So that's a little interesting continuity snafu. So it does make me wonder where that aspect falls, Nick. So that was his last outing at Robin. I wonder how old he was really kind of supposed to be. And also what kind of happened to him in the interim, because it says that Bruce forbade him from being Robin again after his therapy, and then Tim left us soon after. So it makes you wonder, like, what did he do? Did he just run off, or what was he up to since then?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, did he have money saved up? Did he just move? Did Bruce hook, build a trust for him? It's like, all right, there you go. If you're gonna leave, you know what I mean? Like, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Like, how did he survive? At least those initial. It's not like he's not resourceful. He'd be fine.
Right.
It's just a matter of how do you get started.
Yeah, and it's like, we talked about Mask the Phantasm on a recent episode, and we had Adam on for that episode, and he was talking about it's those types of questions, they don't really matter too much for the story that's being told here, and I get that, but looking back in retrospect, it is those things that kind of stick with me afterwards.
And you're doing a story about a comic book character, and comic book fans are notoriously nitpicky.
Yeah.
So there is that.
Some interesting voice actors in this too, in addition to the regular cast like Will Friedle, Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, but also Dean Stockwell does the old Tim Drake in this.
I'm not sure who Dean Stockwell is.
You don't know Dean Stockwell? He was in oh crap, what was that TV show? He was in Battlestar Galactica. He was the original Battlestar Galactica, I mean. Wasn't he also in he's been in a bunch. You'd recognize him if you saw him, basically.
What of those guys?
Oh, Quantum Leap. He was Quantum Leap. That was it. That was the name of the TV show.
Oh, was he
out.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. So he does the old
What?
Tim Drake in this. Also, you got Arlene Sorkin back as Harley Quinn. But still, you also have Melissa Joan Hart is playing Dee Dee.
Right.
Henry Rollins is the voice of Bonk. And also Michael Rosenbaum as Ghoul deliberately doing a Christopher Walken impression.
I love it. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So you got and Michael Rosenbaum, he did a bunch of voices for the DCAU back in the day, before he went on to be Lex Luthor in Smallville. Like Flash was the one he had done the most, but he had done some other ones here and there too.
You forgot the most important voice actor, other than the Trinity that we mentioned at the beginning. You forgot the most important, Frank Welker as Ace and Wolf.
Yeah.
And if you don't know who Frank Welker is, he is the boy. He has been the voice of Scooby-Doo for the last 40 years or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I got tickled. Like, so he just plays all the animals. Got it.
Also had Rachel Lee Cook too, as Chelsea Cunningham was also in there too. So just like these it's funny how they get some of these names that you recognize from other things to pop up in these DC projects.
Right? Wait, Terry Garr was somebody in this too, wasn't she? I think she was the mom.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was Terry's mom.
So yeah, we said Henry Rollins. We said Henry Rollins. I think we got everyone.
Yeah, I think we got everyone. Yeah. Tara Strong too. She came back to do young Batgirl as well. And Mark Hamill also did the voice of Jordan Price. That's another aspect that I, rewatching it, that I completely forgot about. Is that they set up Jordan Price as they do a really good job with that red hair.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I almost forgot to mention, but that was because I was pretty convinced that he was the Joker for the first time I watched it for most of the runtime. And then when they pivot to Tim Drake and they tell you what it all works really well, I think.
I like how it was such a good red herring. Mark Hamill played not only the red herring, he played the actual villain. They did that in another movie too, where was it Mystery of the Batwomen?
Maybe, yeah.
Where the voice actor who played the main suspect was.
No. I think you're thinking of Mask of the Phantasm, because
Phantasm.
They've done a similar bait and switch where they make you think it's Andrea's father. And it's Stacy Keach voicing both the Phantasm and the father. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I thought that's a nice little ploy. I like that. That's really cool. That was really cool.
Freaking Bruce Stratton, he pulled the same trick on us twice.
Right? How about Bruce Timm as the guard?
Oh, really? You're right. Yeah.
He's like literally the last name mentioned, and I think I think he actually has the first lines in the movie, or one of the first lines in the movie. He's like in that very first scene when the Jokers are breaking in. But it's like, hey, I mean, like, you did all this work, you can't get yourself a line or two. Like, ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to talk about with this movie? Because I'm kind of it's tough to movies like this, and we had the same problem when we talked about Mask of the Phantasm. It's just such a good movie that you're kind of finding it hard to find other things to say about it.
It's like, hey, let's gush about Return of the Joker for an hour. Yeah. I'm trying to think. Let me see. Did I mention Max? Mention Tim? Let me see. I hate when I write my notes and then I can't remember. Like, I didn't finish the thought, and now I can't remember what I was writing. How would you? Man, because it was a writer question for you, but I can't remember what it was. It was like, how would you revise? Oh shit. I don't know. Okay. I'll think of it a minute, or I'll message you just for my own entertainment.
All right. Something about how would you revise? Maybe how would you have handled the Joker? I don't know. I'm not sure if I would have handled things. The only thing I would have done differently is I would have had it be Tim Drake completely, and I wouldn't have had the Joker. That's the only thing I could think of that I would have done differently if I was writing this.
I do have a question. Go ahead.
Okay.
What would you, since we don't have anything definitive other than what's in the comic book, which you'll find out if you ever read it, what would you do with the information that you have? what would you do with Nightwing? What would you have said happened in that time period? Like, what would if you had an extra 15 minutes or whatever to stick him in the story somewhere, what would you have him do?
You know, one of the cool things about Nightwing, about Dick Grayson, and I thought the Young Justice TV show handled this really good, was when Wonder Woman is kind of grilling Batman about recruiting Dick into the crusade is so young. And Batman says, Robin had to find his parents' killer and had to bring them to justice. And Wonder Woman says, why? So he could become you? And Batman says, no, because so he wouldn't become me. And that's kind of what I think about Nightwing, because Nightwing is like I can't think of another hero besides Superman who is as intricately tied and has so many close connections, is so well regarded in the DC universe than Dick Grayson, right? Because he's had all these associations with the Titans, all these associations with the Bat family. Like he's Batman if Batman wasn't such a dick, basically. Right, because he's got all the same connections and he's got all the, but he's such a likable guy, and he's like really is like this melding of Batman and Superman in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And he has the best aspects of both those two characters. And so I think, I'm not putting it in the context of this movie, I'm not sure how I would have handled that, but in the context of this continuity, I would have just had him establish a new name for himself as Nightwing, and maybe even have replaced Batman in the Justice League or something like that. Like I would have had him had him surpass Bruce in the hero community is kind of what I would have done with him.
That'd been cool.
But I'm not sure how you work that into, this movie without it feeling like just tacked on.
Man, that's true. That's true. It's a shame they never, that's the one thing I guess they never got to was him. I think they covered everybody else, didn't they?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, they never tell us exactly what happened to Alfred, but we just assume he died at some point.
Right.
But yeah, the only other thing I would change about this is the whole backstory between Bruce and Barbara, because I don't know because that whole idea of like she had this little thing with Nightwing, but she was really attracted to Bruce, and then she ended up her and Bruce have this relationship, kind of like,
that's not appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like Bruce Timm had this weird obsession with this Bruce Wayne Barbara Gordon relationship, which is why have you seen The Killing Joke?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, well, they had an extended opening in The Killing Joke because the actual story wasn't enough to fill the runtime of the movie. Mm-hmm. So they had this extra sequence with Batgirl and where basically her and Bruce hook up.
Oh,
yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad. But yeah, Bruce went and early on in the TV show and Batman Beyond, she makes her Barbara when Terry's asking her about what happened, she makes reference to the fact that her and Bruce were a couple briefly. And it's just, that's one thing I would completely excise out of this, was that whole thing. Because I don't know what Bruce Timm's hang-up is with that idea, but he's been obsessed with that idea for decades.
I don't want to know.
Yeah.
I don't want to know. Do not ruin this for me. It's hard to watch Buffy and Angel, man. Don't ruin this for me.
She's in retrospect, I mean, at least in that, Angel's not exactly a good guy to begin with, so you can make some allowances there. But yeah, it is pretty creepy. But yeah, it's even creepier when you think about it, Batman doing that.
Yeah, it's like you got all the time in the world, and you got all the
you got a rabbit hole you can dive down after we're done recording this, my friend, and then you can kind of disgust yourself.
Oh God.
And you can look up that opening scene on YouTube, I bet too. Where literally rooftop sex with Batman and Batgirl.
I'm sorry, what?
Rooftop sex with Batman and Batgirl. That's the opening scene.
Rooftop sex.
I did not stutter. Yeah, rooftop sex.
I stuttered because I couldn't believe what I just heard.
It's terrible. It's utterly awful.
Wow. Yeah. So when we doing that on superhero cinema?
Oh Jesus.
No,
I've been dreading when someone, suggests doing Killing Joke, because it's not a really good story to begin with, and then you add it, and somehow they took a controversial story and somehow managed, and they were trying to make it better, and they ended up making it so much worse. So much worse.
So sad.
Yeah, it's really bad. All right. Okay. So yeah, watch this movie instead of watching Killing Joke, basically.
Sounds like it.
Anyway, Damon, you got anything else you want to mention about this? I think we covered everything that we're going to say about it.
Yeah, I think I covered everything in my notes. So
I guess the only other thing to mention is probably just kind of the art side of things and the Batman Beyond costume, right? This is such a solid design and such a solid updating of the look, because it doesn't have the cape, but and that was something that kind of threw me off when they had first announced this show, was Batman without a cape. It seems almost sacrilegious, but they managed to use it. It works really well in the show. What about you? What do you think about this design and how they used it?
How did it fit? Again, I don't have it would be, everything was really sleek and streamlined in the show, like the cars and the way they designed everything else. So why wouldn't Batman? Eventually Bruce's cape is gonna get caught in something. He's like, man, I gotta get rid of this thing. But he finally, got jet boots so he can freaking fly. You know what I mean? Like those were things that I always thought about as a kid. Like, why doesn't he just make something that he can fly in? Of course, I wasn't clued in on Iron Man at the time. I really liked it. He had super strength. He had the thing it was a stronger armor. He could turn invisible. I really dug it.
Yeah, it was a cool updating of the suit. Like, I don't want Bruce to have that kind of tech I think they kind of over rely on it, but it works really well for Terry in the context of this series.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bruce would, it's kind of like giving Bucky the Captain America's shield in the MCU. It's like it's like putting a hat on a hat.
Yeah.
Terry is a 17-year-old boy. He needs this stuff.
Yeah, and I think the show did a really good job of that, taking it back to the original episode of the show, because you see Bruce using the Beyond suit in the opening, and it just feels so out of place, like, because it's on the Bruce Wayne character model, and it just feels very out of place when he wears it. And then when Terry puts it on, it's like, oh yeah, this is much better.
Yeah, it does look weird. It really does. Like it's like, shouldn't you have a cape and some shorter ears or something?
Well, also to drive that home, because they did the same thing in taking it back to the Arkham games. In Arkham City, they have a Batman Beyond skin, like different outfits that you can put on you can put Batman in different outfits, different costumes, and one of them is the Batman Beyond suit, but it's still basically the same Batman character model, but with the Batman Beyond suit, and it does look out of place in that too.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Man, yeah, I don't think I have anything to add on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good show. I liked, and I liked they brought Harley back at the end too. It was a nice little. So we find out that because you have these two characters, these twins. Dee Dee is their Deidre and something else, Delilah or something like that, and Arlene Sorkin is voicing both of them. They very much fill the Harley Quinn role, and then you find out at the end of the movie when they're arrested and they're imprisoned, and then their grandmother comes to bail them out, and it's Harley Quinn.
I think Mary Joan Hart did.
Oh, sorry, you're right. Yeah, Melissa Joan Hart did Dee Dee.
Melissa Joan Hart, thank you.
Yeah,
and the original Harley Quinn actress played Granny Nana Harley. That's what they called her, Nana Harley.
I also liked the resolution of the Bruce Tim dynamic at the end when he goes to because that's been one of the recurring themes throughout this whole Batman Beyond show is Bruce's inability to own up to his shit. And this is like kind of the first time that we really see him do that.
Yeah. that was again nice. This was this. I should have picked something. I should have picked something that sucks so we could have griped about an hour and a half.
That's okay. Well, what I think when we originally talked about you coming on the show, you threatened to do Spawn, so we could do that next time.
Is that that's the new low? Is that the new low now after Steel?
No, I don't think that's not as bad as Steel. I think Steel is, yeah.
The new low you haven't done. I guess it should be more specific.
Yeah, the new low I haven't done is probably Spawn. I think, yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to write that down. You invite me back. I'm coming. We're doing Spawn.
Right. I'd actually just finished reading the compendium, which has like the first 50 issues of Spawn. So I'd actually just finished reading that. So,
right on top of mind.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very much top of mind right now. Anyway, Damon, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
You can find me on all the social medias. Well, not all of them, but Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm most active on Twitter at Damon Does, all one word. And all those will be at Damon Does. And you can also check out, I do have a podcast or two that I'm on. Damon Does the 6 Questions, where I interview creatives and ask them the same 6 questions. And we regale stories about their highs and lows and learn something about the creative process and help each other out. And then Disputed, we actually, as we're recording this will be tomorrow, but this will already be out by the time you hear it. We're doing a tournament. We're doing a 16 person tournament of the 16 of the greatest fighters in cinema. So we've got like your Jack Reachers, we've got Kato from Green Hornet, we've got Beatrix Kiddo, I think Martin Riggs is in it, and we've stacked them up into a tournament. And what we're going to do is debate them down until we have one final winner. So that'll be going on for the next few months.
Nice.
So that's always fun. Tune in for that one. That'll be a blast.
And also about the Damon Does podcast. If anyone missed it the first time around, you did a really cool interview when you had Derek on, back before passing. So definitely look that one up because that was a really good episode.
Thank you very much. That's one of my personal favorites.
Yeah. All right, Damon, thanks so much for coming back again. It was great having you on. Good to have you come back again, and we'll do Spawn next time, and then we'll have more to talk about because we'll have more to rant about.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
All right, so that does it for this episode of Superhero Cinephiles. Super Cinema Pod is where you can find us on Twitter and Instagram, and superherocinephiles.com is our website. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. You have been listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Super Cinema Pod. Join our Facebook group by searching for Superhero Cinephiles, where you can interact with us and other superhero fans. If you'd like to support the show, you can become a regular supporter at Patreon or make a one-time donation through PayPal, both of which can be found at our website, superherocinephiles.com. If you buy or rent any movies through the Amazon links at our site, it helps support the show. Please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.